Hi class, this is William. In other lecture videos, we covered two of the three elements of persuasion, ethos and logos. In this video, I want to talk to you about pathos. Pathos is an appeal to emotion or pity. Now, humans by nature are pleasure seekers and pain avoiders. It's instinctive for us. So there are two emotions that are particularly effective in persuading people. Hope, which appeals to our nature as pleasure seekers, and fear, which appeals to our nature as pain avoiders. So, for example, with hope, if you've ever watched reality television, you have seen people perhaps eat bugs or live with strangers they may not like, or in very difficult circumstances in hope of getting a reward. Fear, in an extreme case, if you have a greedy person that loves money more than anything, you put a gun to their head, convince them you'll blow their brains out if they don't hand you their wallet, they will hand you their wallet, the keys to their car, their watch, and pretty much anything else you ask for. Fear and hope are both very powerful motivators. Now, something about each of them is that they are powerless without the other. So hope without fear is not persuasive, and fear without hope is not persuasive. So, for example, if a child is hoping for an allowance and therefore they're doing their chores and behaving, if you take away that fear, in other words, they think they're going to get their allowance anyway, they still have the same hope of getting the allowance, it's just no longer persuasive. It's no longer reason to do their chores and behave. Conversely, fear without hope is not persuasive. Going back to that rather extreme example of the greedy person, you have a gun to their head, convince them you'll blow their brains out. What happens if they think you're going to shoot them anyway? In other words, they feel the fear that you're going to shoot them, but they have no hope that giving their wallet will stop it. Well, it's no longer persuasive. The fear is present, but without hope, it simply isn't persuasive. So pathos involves all appeals to emotion or pity. Two of the more effective ones, as I've mentioned, are hope and fear. But for one to be effective, the other must be present. The last thing I want to talk to you about with pathos is something that I mentioned briefly in an earlier talk, and that is that pathos is fast-acting, not long-lasting, using the language of the over-the-counter pain medicine. In other words, the choice of emphasizing pathos really depends on, do you want them persuaded now or later? All persuasive speeches should utilize the effective use of ethos, pathos, and logos, all three of them together. But in some circumstances of persuasion, pathos tends to be the primary thing used other than perhaps ethos. For example, in a crisis situation. In a crisis situation, you really need people to be persuaded very, very quickly. If your child is about to run out in the middle of traffic, reasoning with them is probably not the best method at that point. You use hope and fear to try to get them to comply. You'll notice that political campaigns tend to rely very heavily on pathos. The reason is because they don't actually need you persuaded for long. They just need you persuaded long enough to vote. So, for example, if you voted for our current president, and then immediately, like 5 minutes after you submit your ballot, you decide you don't actually like this person, they're kind of okay with that. I mean, they would prefer to have your support and for you to like them all the time, but they really needed you persuaded long enough to fill out that ballot. In addition to a crisis situation or politics, commercial enterprise oftentimes tends to be reliant on pathos. For example, if you're crossing the parking lot and you have a 12-pack of Coca-Cola, and in that moment you decide you actually prefer Pepsi, Coca-Cola is kind of okay with that. They just needed you persuaded long enough to buy their product. Their hope is, at least by the next time you're picking out your soda, that you like Coca-Cola again. So I hope this helps you understand not only what pathos is, an appeal to emotion or pity, the two emotions that are particularly effective here, their reliance on each other, and finally, some of the circumstances where pathos would be the primary emphasis, again, other than ethos. As always, if you have any questions at all, please let me know. Thank you.